dealing with allergies right now. They're kind of kicking my ass, so if I sound a little bit stuffy at different points of this video, seriously, dude, there's somebody that's like mowing the grass right outside of the window, and unfortunately, I can't get them to stop, so occasionally I'm gonna have to speak over them like this. Quiet Place Part 2 is written and directed by John Krasinski, who also briefly stars in the film, just like he starred in the first movie. Emily Blunt, who is his real-life wife. You've got Millicent Simmons, you've got Jude... Okay, I can't remember the last name of the older kid, but Jude something. I'm pretty sure it's Jude Parr or Jude Paig or something like that. You've got Cillian Murphy, you've got Jimon Hansu, among other people in this movie. I don't want to spoil the end of the first movie, but this movie picks up pretty much right after the end of the first movie. Emily Blunt and her children have survived the ordeal that befell them at the end of the first movie, and now they kind of have to move on to a different location because their location is compromised or whatever, so they have to find a new place to be. Along the way, they run into Cillian Murphy's character, and then they find themselves in a bunch of really intense situations and scenarios that once again will test their resolve and their will to survive while also being quiet as hell. Because these monsters are still out there, and yes, they will still kill you if you make any kind of noise. So that's essentially the movie, and I don't want to give away too much more because, you know, I just really don't like spoilers. I was a huge fan of A Quiet Place. This was one of my favorite movies of 2018. In fact, it's a movie that very nearly made my top 10 list of movies for that year. Going into A Quiet Place Part 2, I'll be honest, I didn't really see why it needed a sequel. Like, it stood on its own, and it could have just been its own thing, and I would have been fine with it. But, you know, I heard John Krasinski was once again directing it, and I thought he did a good job with the first one, so I'm like, what the hell? Sure, let's see what he's got. I have to say that after watching this movie, this is one of the best horror movie sequels that I think I've ever seen in my life. Also, I am just fascinated and interested in anything that John Krasinski wants to do from now on. Like, any work that he is attached to, I'm immediately going to be interested in it, and it's because of his work on these two films, both as a writer and a director. The thing that was a big part of what made the first movie so excellent in the first place, and it once again returns here, the way that this movie is able to play with sound. You guys know those movies or those moments where all the music and all of the sound is like drained from a scene? It feels like something inevitably is gonna happen or something's gonna jump out at you or whatever. Like, you see that in a lot of horror movies. You don't see it utilized to this degree or with this level of execution in a movie like this. It feels like you're walking on a tight wire the entire movie. Just the tension, the suspense, and action sequences are ratcheted up even more so than they were in the first movie. Very similar to the first movie in that it uses the sound design to really play with the environment around these characters. What it does better than the first one, I think, is that it puts our characters in more interesting scenarios and situations. I like that because it's a way to challenge the characters while also keeping the focus on them and not getting lost in the monster stuff of this universe. The monsters are here, and John Krasinski does a good job at showing them, and they're just as fearsome and intimidating and with an interesting design as they were in the first movie, but they're not the point. They're never the point. He makes a point of framing a lot of scenes from the character's point of view. A lot of stuff is just kind of happening around the characters or slightly out of frame or maybe over to the side, but the shot is focused on the characters and how they're reacting. I just love the way that he was able to film that throughout this movie. Also, just like the first movie, the performances are key here because a lot of the performance in this movie is nonverbal. These characters are not allowed to talk, and if they are talking, they're not allowed to talk very loudly. They have to talk in very hushed, quiet tones. So a lot of times you're relying on nonverbal cues and facial expressions and, you know, just you're relying on a lot of other stuff that has nothing to do with talking. And all of the actors in this movie absolutely crushed it, killed it, knocked it out of the park. Emily Blunt is queen of this at this point. Like, she's such an amazing actress. There's nothing really I can say about Emily Blunt that you haven't heard before. I will say the kids are even better in this movie than they were in the first one. The movie is somehow shorter than the first one, but twice as intense and twice as action-packed and twice as interesting because they do a good job at building this world both before and after this event where all these monsters attack everybody. At the same time, there are still questions. There are still things that are not completely answered, and the way the movie ends off, you definitely could see how they could build another sequel out of this. I really have to strain myself to find things that I don't like about this movie, honestly. I suppose you could argue that the ending was a little bit abrupt, and that maybe some people are going to be unsatisfied with it. Maybe they were trying to go for an emotional ending that kind of tied into the first, and maybe it didn't land as well as I think the movie wanted it to, but I'll be honest, other than that, I don't really have any issues. I'm kind of grasping at straws here. Quiet Place Part 2 is the horror sequel that we have been waiting for. It absolutely deserves the highest praise this channel can offer, Superman Prime. Tell me, have you seen A Quiet Place Part 2? What did you think about it? Give me your thoughts on it in the comment section down below. Please like and subscribe to the Superfan Show. Stay tuned for more videos. And if you like what you see, tell me how you feel and stay tuned to hear more from the Man of Steel. Peace.